mental health awareness. I will start again. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for attending tonight's panel discussion on mental health awareness and suicide prevention. My name's Laura Johnson, and I use she, her pronouns. I want to start tonight by acknowledging that we're on the ancestral lands of the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. I also want to thank each of our panelists here today for your willingness to share and to participate tonight. I've been very inspired by your collective passion and commitment to this important topic of mental health awareness and suicide prevention. So thank you. I recently read that mental health is not a destination, but a lifelong exploration. And that really resonated with me, especially during the current health crisis. I believe that we need to do all that we can to normalize conversations around mental health and to work to remove the stigma often associated with mental illness. I wish to thank Luke Dilsterhorst for your initiative in bringing these discussions to Edmonds last year, as well as your willingness to moderate tonight's discussions. I am honored to be able to continue the work recognizing National Suicide Prevention Month by holding this community discussion, as well as the upcoming QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer Suicide Prevention Training with Wendy Birchhill from the Snohomish Health District. And that will take place next Thursday at 7 p.m. And for information in the Zoom link, you can go to wecare.edmondswa.gov. We're going to begin tonight with brief introductions from each panelist before a moderated discussion, and then we will take audience questions. Audience members can submit questions in the Q&A box that's in, I would say upper right corner, but it's kind of, on mine it's centered, so somewhere towards the right centered. We're going to do our best to get to all of the questions before 8:30 end time. And to best promote a safe space for all, please abide by the following agreements. Be respectful with all communication. Be open to new ideas and ways of thinking. Share your knowledge and expertise. Challenge your assumptions and biases, and take care of yourself as needed throughout and after tonight's discussions. So now, please take a minute or less and tell us who you are and why you are passionate about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And we'll start with Justine Mcclure from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Laura, for having me. It's an honor. And I greatly appreciate that Edmonds, the city of Edmonds, is taking a bold stand around mental health, in particular suicide prevention. It's going to take all of us to help decrease the numbers and destigmatize suicide and mental health. So I greatly appreciate the leaders and all of you that are tuning in this evening, because it's going to be each and every one of us talking about our mental health. I am with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I oversee Washington and Idaho state chapters, and we are the #1 suicide prevention organization nationwide. We provide hope and healing and connection to those that have been impacted by suicide. My personal why and why I show up every day is I struggle. I have many family members that struggle with their own mental health. And I know that it's a priority for myself, but also for generations to come. If we can help those that have been impacted, but also create a future where mental health is normal to talk about, just like our regular physical health. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Justine. Next, we have Tim Kravinick from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's always a pleasure to be here. I am a resident of Mcclure, so I'm a neighbor just nearby. I work at Boeing. I am a father of 3 girls, Julia, who is now 23, Tia, who is 9 and in 4th grade, and Nina, who passed away at 15, 5 years ago this month, of suicide. So I'm here to honor Nina. I'm here to do what I can to make sure no other family goes through what my family's going through. And so I really too do want to make sure that I'm, here representing just a normal person, a normal family, and hopefully I can give you some tools to help as your children may be struggling with their mental health.
Thank you, Tim. Welcome. Next, we have from the Edmond Senior Center, Michelle Rattan.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you, Laura, for having me. And as Laura mentioned, my name is Michelle, and I am the social worker at the Edmonds Waterfront Center, or the Edmonds Senior Center. And I work with seniors specifically, of course. And one of the reasons I'm honored to be on this panel is I do feel like seniors are kind of that population that doesn't necessarily get thought about quite as much in suicide. And it definitely is a problem with the community. And so I'm passionate about helping that community, but also educating everyone else that it is a population that we can't forget about when we're talking about suicide prevention.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome. Next, we have from the Edmond School District, Joanna Rockwood.
Hello and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for including me on this very important panel. I am a school psychologist with the Edmond School District, but one of the reasons why I'm here is because suicide prevention has been my passion work. And I have been honored to be able to be the suicide prevention coordinator for the Edmond School District. And it started through my own personal loss of a nephew who passed away to suicide at the age of 15. And since then, I have just committed to always showing up for this very important topic. And it has brought me to suicide prevention efforts within Edmond School District, but then also panels such as this and a whole host of really important and honorable places to be able to show up and do this important work. And so thank you so much for inviting me. And I am happy to be in this conversation with everybody this evening.
Thank you. Welcome, Joanna. Next, we have from the Edmonds community and also a diversity commission member, Sarah Mixon.
Hi, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you, Laura. I'm honored to be here. I come to this with a personal connection. I lost my big brother when he was 39 to suicide. And I also belong to the LGBTQ community, which has a very high level of mental health issues. So I wanted to come to speak for that. And I'm very honored to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being here. So welcome to all, and thank you for being here. I'm now going to let Luke take over, and hopefully Luke, if you would start by telling us a little bit about why you started this work.
Sure. Thanks, Laura. And thank you to all our panelists and viewers that are here tonight. I think just last year, especially in the pandemic, we saw, really unimaginable circumstances for many families that I think brought mental health and suicide prevention to the forefront and caused people to think about it and speak about it even more than in the past. It's something that has always been there and always existed and that we should always be paying attention to. But last year, it felt like it was really put even more at the forefront and on everyone's radar. And I thought, we need to do more in our community and wanted to bring people together and start having these conversations in an open and safe space to promote it for our community health. So thank you for coming, stepping up this year, Laura, and organizing this. And I'm proud to help moderate tonight. Just a reminder to our viewers, you can submit questions in the Q&A tab, and I think we'll be answering those at the end. And I have about 6 to 8 minutes, I think, of questions for each panelist here tonight. And we're going to start with Justine. Thanks for being here, Justine.
Absolutely.
So as an expert working in the field of suicide prevention, maybe we can start at that 30,000 foot level. Can you kind of set the stage for what we as a community need to do to be aware of when it comes to mental health and suicide prevention?
Yeah. So suicide deaths in the United States is the 10th leading cause of death nationwide. We need to give it the attention as being the 10th leading cause of death. When we look at individuals, we know our last firm CDC numbers, we lost 48,000 people across the nation. We also know that for every loss of someone who dies by suicide, the impact ripples the community. It affects us all immensely. Through data and through numbers, we can say that on an average, 25 people have attempted suicide for every person who has died by suicide. Nationwide, that means annually right now, 1.2 million individuals are attempting to die by suicide. That's far too many. And for being a leading cause of death, we know it's preventable. Our hiccup and where we're at is stigma. We need to normalize and we need to reach out to individuals that we know are struggling, or ourselves having the confidence and knowing where to go and knowing that other people are there for you, and being okay with sharing your story, and being resilient on how we handle our mental health. It's not a one-all fix-all. All of us are going to have different mental health challenges throughout our life. And what we really need to do is that as a community is come together and have all these different resources, like an education night, like trainings, like mentors and leaders in the community, so people can go out and truly speak to someone, or just have a safe person to say, you know what, I'm struggling right now. I need help.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to me. I think I'm still young, but then when I think about the dates of my youth, they're not so recent past. I saw counselors when I was growing up in, let's say, late 90s, early 2000s. But again, I didn't talk about that with any of my friends. And I see it very differently now, having, teenage daughter in high school, that there's been a shift. Can you maybe talk about the last 10 years and kind of how that's progressed?
Yeah, we definitely have progressed around the stigma around mental health and seeking care, getting different treatments, being okay with different treatments, and resources. We are starting to see more and more resources, inpatient, outpatient, and being okay and normalizing that. And also just going and seeking that help. I think the generation that is currently going through school, including college-age students, we are trying our best, and they're hearing the message that mental health is a priority for them, that they need to self-care, they need to check in with themselves, and they typically are finding adults that are safe individuals. Now, part of that equation is training our adults, training those around them so that we can help them and we can provide that comfort and healing that they need. But we have gained a lot of momentum in the last 10 years. We did see for many, many years a double-digit increase year after year of individuals dying by suicide. We have done education such as safe storing, both medicine and other lethal means. We have done education about mental health and seeking care. And hopefully we are starting to see that trend, in the trend of either flatlining or even going down. We did see in 2019, we are seeing a decrease with the numbers coming through from the CDC, and we're actually anticipating almost a 5% drop in 2020 during the pandemic. And that's because people are seeking care. It's because we were talking about our mental health. Everybody was talking about our mental health. Everybody showed when they were struggling and how they were struggling, because isolation, feeling lonely, feeling scared, those are all things that we can connect with and we were all experiencing. So it takes the community, and we're seeing that. We're seeing people being willing to put themselves out there and say, just like you did, Luke, I received help. This is part of my story, and there's hope. I am here. I'm doing amazing things in life. And just because I went to a therapist when I was younger, there's so much ahead because I gained tools in my toolbox on how to handle my mental health moving forward as an adult, and then continue to normalize mental health and seeking care.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the drop that kind of has happened during the COVID pandemic, because I know it was something that was a happy surprise, shall we say, in that many people were expecting something different. We heard that from the Snohomish Health District. So moving kind of from the pandemic and now looking toward the future, what are the priorities that you're looking at?
Yeah. So we don't want to take the decrease by any value. What we want to do is truly amp up and continue the conversation around mental health, access to care, and how somebody can receive treatment or reach out or talk to someone or know what websites to go to and get information. We have to keep this momentum going. We don't know, we can't predict coming out of the pandemic what is going to happen. But what we do know is when we have an elevated community of stressors, so bills, financially, connections, as we come out of the pandemic, it could be tough for a lot of individuals. And that's where the leaders in our community, us as individuals in the community, need to be there as a beacon of hope for so many as they come to struggling with mental health, or it becomes something where you see it, you trust your gut instinct that somebody is struggling. We all need to know how to have a conversation and how to sit down with someone and help them through their crisis point.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Justine, for chatting tonight, and for all of your work in your day job in our region as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And so next, I think we're going to go to Michelle, who was a participant in our suicide prevention work last year as well. So Michelle, thanks for being here again. And I think you touched on this a little bit in your introduction, but sometimes we think of depression and suicide as illnesses primarily impacting young people. But as you said, the impact is across all ages, including our senior populations. And we know that in Edmonds, we have a large senior population. So what do you kind of most wish our community members understood about mental health and aging?
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you for having me again this year. I think the thing that I most want that with aging comes depression, and that depression is a normal part of aging. And it's not. It could be an effective aging, but it's not a normal part of aging. And older adults, or about 12% of the population, but they make up about 18% of all the suicides. So they have a large percentage of the suicides. And one of the reasons that the number is so high that they believe is that older adults, especially men, have a much higher death rate than other groups. And 1 in 4 seniors who attempts to kill themselves will die compared to 1 in 20 youth. So they have a very high rate of completion. And the reason is there's a feeling they have more access to lethal means, firearms, and or medication. And 51% of all completed suicides are with a firearm. But when you just look at the senior population, that number rises to about 70%. So it's quite high. And that is something that we don't really hear about very much. And so that's one thing that I would like people to know, is that it definitely is an issue. And low, because seniors have access to so much medication, there are different ways. I mean, you could perhaps, quit taking your medication, or you can have an accidental overdose, and those don't necessarily show up necessarily as perhaps suicides. And the other thing I want people to understand is that suicide, or not suicide, I'm sorry, depression in seniors can be caused by different factors than also younger people. And of course, if you have a personal history of depression throughout your life, that will continue into your adulthood unless you are able to get help as you're aging. But seniors do have specific factors that can cause depression as they're older, and that could be, a loss of multiple loved ones. Of course, as we age, the people around us start to die, and I hear that a lot from the seniors I work with, that I'm so lonely. All my friends are dying. My husband has passed away. So I just don't have any close friends and isolated. And I think all of us can understand. I mean, we've all experienced that this last, 18 months. So I think we can understand that seniors kind of felt this even twofold over this last year and a half. It's something that they normally deal with, but with the pandemic being so dangerous for them and COVID-19 being so dangerous for them, they really stayed isolated. I talked to a couple seniors that they didn't leave their house for 9 to 10 months. They had people dropping food off at their doorstep, but they were so terrified they would not leave their house, which really, of course, impacted their mental health. The other things that they worry about is feeling that they're a burden to other people, they're a burden to their loved ones, and they don't want to be that. Also, as you get older, your health really starts to decline. So you might lose your sense of vision, hearing, even taste. And so you can be in a room full of people, but if you can't hear them or see them very well, you're still very isolated because you're not able to really engage with people. So that really can lead to depression also. And also, food insecurity, financial troubles, especially when you're older, if you're on a very fixed income, possibility of getting another job, getting more work, being able to help your situation. But when you're older and you're on a fixed income, you really don't have that other option to get another job or find another way to supplement your income. So it really could cause a lot of stressors to them. And the other thing that's kind of unique to seniors around depression is that depression could be a comorbidity. It can co-occur with other illnesses. And so as we become older, and when we have serious medical illnesses such as diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and Parkinson's disease, that can lead to depression, or it can make your depression worse. And sometimes medication that you take in order to combat some of these illnesses can also lead to depression. So it could be a side effect. So those are kind of specific things that can lead to seniors having depression. And there's also something called vascular depression. Age, you can suffer from a restricted blood flow. And so over time, as your blood vessels stiffen, it prevents blood loss from flowing to your organs, and that includes your brain. So those are kind of different situations that are specific to seniors for perhaps causing depression in that population.
Thanks. And I know you mentioned this a little bit with, say, the food insecurity and deploying assistance to older adults or seniors, especially during the pandemic. I'm wondering, are there also kind of barriers to treating depression in older adults?
Sure. Yeah, and definitely. And I think one of the barriers is kind of the first thing I spoke about, is that we think that depression is kind of a normal part of aging. And so it's not necessarily addressed I guess as much as it would be to a younger population. And there's this feeling that it's a normal part. But also what's unfortunate about that perception is that leaks into our healthcare as well. And so when doctors are treating their patients, and most doctors tend to be about half the age of a lot of the seniors that they're working with. And so for them, I don't want to stereotype, but there's the idea that it's normal to be experiencing multiple deaths. So of course you're depressed. And so there is not the same emphasis on treating older people with depression as there is with the younger population. And on the other side of that, definitely culturally, the older population, they don't necessarily like to talk about their feelings, especially men. And so when they go to the doctor, they aren't, they're talking about the physical elements, but they're not talking about that they're feeling down, they're not feeling very well emotionally, they're depressed. So it's not really addressed. And 58% of the older adults who die by suicide, they have seen their primary care physician in the last month of their life. So it's just, unfortunately, it's just not being spoken about, or it's just not really being addressed as much as hopefully it could be addressed. And I think what's important is for all of us is to kind of be looking for those signs of depression in our loved ones, in our older community. And, so if you see somebody who's teary-eyed and crying, and there doesn't really be any apparent reason for that, if there's changes in their sleep pattern, if they're starting to really isolate themselves, if they stop drinking or eating, or perhaps not taking their medication as diligently as they used to be, or they're talking about, feeling worthless or hopeless, or talking about giving their belongings away. I think that's a really important time to kind of start having that conversation and asking people, how they're feeling it, and not be afraid of talking about depression, and kind of helping them seek help if they need it. And I think the other thing that's really important, older adults, I think, have a sense of loss of value to the community. They're not seen as important anymore because they're not necessarily contributing. We help seniors stay connected to each other and to other people in the community. But not only that, but we help them feel valued. And because there's nothing that's more important that people understand that they have worth to themselves, but also to the community as a whole.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thanks also for the work you're doing here in Edmonds.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to turn over to Sarah now. Good evening, Sarah.
Hello.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people, and LGBTQIA+ youth are particularly at risk. According to CDC data, LGBTQIA+ youth are 4 times as likely to attempt suicide as their peers. What do you think LGBTQIA+ youth are more vulnerable to mental health struggles? Why do you think that is?
A lot of it is stigma of being LGBTQ in some communities, especially. Some youth are actually disowned by their families and kicked out and become homeless, or are couch surfing on friends' couches. So it partly depends on the community they're coming out into. They also have the internalized stigma of being different, especially again in certain communities. There's discrimination in school and in the community as well. They see negative stereotypes around them. Some of them experience violence. They're beat up or spit on or whatever. They're a target for people. Some of them have had to deal with conversion therapy with family members or whoever trying to change them to be straight, and which doesn't work and actually leads to more suicide attempts than anything. And they also don't have the same resources for mental health in some communities. They have to get permission from parents to see a therapist, or there aren't any that are affirming in their area. Some of them go to faith communities that don't support LGBTQ folks. So unfortunately, there's a lot of stressors for young ones who are not in the normal, whatever that means, category. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm wondering, how do we move away from the stressors and into the positives? What do you, I know serving on the diversity commission, you're really kind of plugged in with what we can do as a community. And I'm curious how you think, Edmonds or any community or even families can better support our LGBTQ community.
Sure. One thing that happened this year for the first time, I think, was a pride flag was flown from City Hall. And that was a huge deal. I know for some people it wasn't, but for our community, that was a huge deal. So things like that, saying, we stand with you, you are part of our community, is huge. The library has a wonderful story group that supports LGBTQ storytellers. There's the Edmonds Pride is a group that's on Facebook, and I think they've started having their once a month breakfasts again. We had to stop that for COVID, but I think that's happening again. There's resources out there. There's the Trevor Project, which is a national project that focuses on suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth. They have an amazing library of workbooks and stuff for allies as well as youth on what it is to be trans or whatever, what it is to be gay or lesbian, to help folks understand. Because for a lot of people, this is a new world that they have not really seen or don't understand, and not understanding leads to fear. So they do amazing work. I highly recommend folks look for that on the web. There's, let's see, another one actually for elders is SAGE, S-A-G-E, SAGE is a national advocacy group, and they have a hotline for folks as well. And a local one is to Cocoon House. They also support LGBTQ youth. So those are some of them. On our own, things we can do is accept people's pronouns for what they give them to you as, and also list your own, so they're safe to say what they are. It's a small gesture, but it says a lot. If they've changed their name, support the new name. If people want to show you who they really are, accept them for who they really are. That kind of support will go a long way. Even if it's just a few people in someone's life, that can be the lifeline that they need to get through the most difficult parts of their young life right now. The schools are getting better about having resources for folks. I'm really proud of Edmond School District and our surrounding area in that regard. So they can go to their school counselors and get help. But I would say supporting whoever they tell you they are, accept them for who they are, support them. And if you need to, go find the resources for them. That's what I'd ask.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now we're gonna chat with Tim, and Tim was also a participant in last year's panel. So thank you, Tim, for being here again tonight.
Hi, thanks.
And so you mentioned in your introduction your daughter Nina, and I'm wondering if you could share some of Nina's story and your family's personal experience with mental health and suicide.
Yeah, I would love to. And I'd first like to, boy, Sarah, that was a great message. Thank you. And I do stand with my LGBTQ friends and family. I'm a he and a him and a his, so I will proudly accept my pronouns as well. And Justine, Michelle, wow, what great stories. Justine and I have partnered for a long time, and just so passionate about this cause, so thank you. And I'm very passionate about my daughter, Nina. I'll try to show a picture without much of a glare. There she is. That was taken about a week before she passed away. Nina was pretty, smart, funny, athletic. She was a ninth grader at Kamiak, and just the year before, or just months before she passed away, was voted most improved on her soccer team. She always had a smile on her face. Everybody liked her, but she was sad. And you know, I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't have the tools as a parent of how to help her. And once she finally acknowledged that she wasn't just sad, but she was sad all the time, we learned that she had been cutting herself, self-harm. She had a severe social anxiety to the point where she could hardly go out into public. We had a trip the summer before she passed away. She passed away again 5 years ago this month. So we were in New York City, and it was just, you know, walking in the streets of New York was just terrifying for her. So I walked the streets of New York with my arm around her. And when things got really bad and she was just unable to deal with things, she had a code word. Now, of course, she had a silly sense of humor, so her code word was Oompa Loompa. So she would say, "Oh, look, there's an Oompa Loompa over there," as her cue to me that she was in a very seriously bad place. We did what we thought we could at the time to help. And, you know, she went back to school, and, you know, it was just the social pressures, the depression, was too much, and ended up passing away about 5 years ago.
You mentioned these tools as a parent, and I'm curious, you know, what do you know now that you wish you had known, you know, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Luke, and because I think this is really, again, where my passion is the learning and now hopefully teaching. The first thing for me was, you know, as a father, and I know a lot of men are like this, and some women are like this too. You try to fix things. And so I would be talking with her in the evenings of the summer before she passed away. And, you know, the reaction is, you know, she's struggling and trying to explain to you how she's feeling was, well, go suck it up. And what I didn't realize, you know, the mental illness she was experiencing was as real as any physical illness. So if someone is having a heart attack, you don't say, go suck it up. You go get them help. And so I really do have learned that mental health and physical health should be treated the same. Mental health is real. Her feelings, you know, and I see this with people quite a bit. She would be expressing her feelings, and to me, they didn't make any sense. And like, how can you even be thinking that? But every feeling she had was real to her. And so as a parent, don't dismiss those feelings, and just listen. I'm here for you. Again, don't try to fix it. Don't try to, you know, tell her to suck it up or whatever. Just listen and be there and do what you can just to understand where she's coming from.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, this has transformed your life, and you've used Nina's passing to, you know, try and help others in many communities. So I'm curious, what are you doing with the AFSP? You know, what are you doing in Mcclure or Edmonds or in our area to continue to educate parents and help other families in need?
Yeah, thanks again for the question. So the year after she passed away, let me back up. The day after she passed away, or the day she passed away, Dawn and I, my wife Dawn and I said, hey, we talked to the school principal, and said, look, we don't want to sweep this under the rug. We want to make sure people know how she passed away, because we want to help break that stigma. So we don't want to hide the cause of her death. And so that was an immediate decision we made, and to talk about it. Again, like we've talked about earlier this evening, we would just have the conversation to break the stigma. So that was step one. And then I got involved with AFSP. Dawn, again, my wife, Dawn, she's led a team, Team Nina. I'm very proud of what the work she does and what Team Nina has done. Team Nina is the AFSP's #1 fundraiser is community walks. They call it the Out of the Darkness Walk. Unfortunately, the last 2 years with the pandemic, we haven't been able to have a physical walk, but we've made do, and we had a great drive-through event just last weekend in Everett. And there's events in all the communities around the state. There's a big walk in Seattle. Again, it will be a drive-through event, but in October. But Dawn has led Team Nina over the last 4 years, and she has raised over $70,000 to help the AFSP, where they focus on research and education and survivor services and advocacy. And so, first of all, the fundraising has been huge. That's been a huge part of what I've done. And again, I won't take any credit because Tom does most of the work, but that's been big. Joining the AFSP, I lead the advocacy efforts. So I've just last spring was engaged with with Senator Leas in the 21st District, and partnered with him a little bit, got connections with our state legislatures on some key legislation. One of the ones we're most excited about is the funding of 988 suicide prevention hotline. So a year or so ago, Congress authorized a new phone number for the suicide hotline instead of 1-800 I can't even remember it. Justine can help me. 273-TALK is the number, and it's been replaced with 988. Now it's not in effect yet, so please nobody go call that yet. It's not in effect. But Washington State was the first state to fully fund 988, including wraparound services. So follow up with people who have called, and that's a really big deal. And again, so my work there, I think, has hopefully helped. Once a year, we do similar advocacy with our congressional delegation in DC. Again, this year we did it virtual. So again, another area where we can be really powerful. And we can help it. There's a huge shortage of counselors and therapists in schools. I'm very excited to see what Joanna has to say about the schools. And that is one other area where I am focusing. I mentioned I have a 9-year-old, Tia, in 4th grade at Mcclure Elementary. You talked about what are we doing differently. Every night, or not every night, but very regularly, we talk to her about how she feels and really ask those deeper questions and really ask her how she's feeling. Again, where Nina on the surface was always happy, underneath she wasn't, and I didn't know that. And I would attribute it to regular teenage mood swings. Yeah, she's just a moody teenager, but should have had more deeper conversations earlier. But again, we're learning, working with Tia. There's a book out there, a Gizmo book that Justine turned us on. There's a character called Gizmo. It's the cutest puppy dog you've ever seen in your life. And we've read it with Tia, and it talks about mental health and mental well-being, passed it around the neighborhood. Don's made sure all of our neighbors have read it. A great resource for kids. And so I am also advocating that we, with the schools, have more curriculum at the early grades, as early as kindergarten, talking about mental health and mental well-being. And that one of the other things I have done is I've been on the curriculum committee for the Mcclure School District and helped shape some of that curriculum that we're seeing now as well. So thank you, Luke, for the questions. Thanks again, Laura, for having me here.
Well, thank you, Tim, for all the work that you're doing. And as a father of a 15-year-old, resonates very strongly. I think next we have a short video from the Edmond School District Mental Health Community Forum that's going to be played. This is also available on the district website. The students and families have given permission for us to share this video tonight. So I think that will play in a second.
The hardest part of the COVID pandemic has been I haven't been able to see my friends and family, and I haven't been spending quality time.
Well, not seeing friends really, because you don't actually see that many friends.
In the beginning when I couldn't see anyone at all, and even now when I can't see that many people, and also before we got to go in person 2 days a week, it was really hard being online and kind of worrisome and scary.
Online school is harder than I thought it would be, especially doing it for like a year, and then it's just hard with Zoom and online work, and yeah.
For me, it's just been school and dealing with Zoom and just how the teachers are just like assigning back-to-back work.
It was hard for me to figure out how much I should work every day and how much I should spend. I should give myself some breaks.
The hardest part about the COVID pandemic for me has been the lack of boundary between being at home and being able to do work. So throughout this pandemic, I felt very like I'm never resting, like I'm always doing work, that I'm constantly tired.
I was actually doing okay, getting work in on time, but after a while I just felt drained and felt very unmotivated, had no energy, and I just really couldn't set up my days right, just because I have a lot of siblings, a big family, and they all got affected by the pandemic in a different way.
What I've learned from this pandemic is how to use the computer.
And to be independent, because when you're in a breakout room, you can't really go up to your teacher and ask them a question about your homework.
I've really gained a new appreciation for in-person school. Like, it's so hard to have to do the stuff remotely, and it's so much easier, so much more easy. That's awesome. I don't care. It's so much easier to do school when you're actually in the building and have people that you can talk to.
Just being by myself and just getting the time to really think, I guess. It just really set my mind to what I really need to do and what I really need to focus on.
The thing I learned from this experience was that I am more capable of doing work and the things I love than I thought I'd be able to do.
I've gotten a lot more appreciative of my family, just because those were the only people I was talking to during the pandemic really a lot, and they helped me do a lot of things. And I've noticed that they're going to always be there for me. So that's something I gained. Another thing I gained, I feel like, is a lot of independence and just wanting to do more things by myself and asking for help at the same time. Before, I feel like I wouldn't ask for help. And if I didn't know how to do something, I just wouldn't do it. Now I will actually go out and ask for help.
One thing I've learned from this experience is like the way that I'm going through this pandemic isn't how everyone else is going through it. So people go through it in different ways, and there's multiple people going through it in multiple different ways. So I have to just be considerate of how they're dealing with it instead of trying to force how I'm dealing with it on them.
I think that I'd feel supported if the vaccines started developing quicker and everyone started getting one, because right now it's usually just the adults getting them, and I kind of want people to start wearing their masks over their noses instead of under.
Advice about troubleshooting, advice about dealing with not seeing friends and having to see them over Zoom, and having them not go to the same school anymore. It was hard.
It just feels helpful when I have people around me who can talk about it, who are going through the same thing as me. And when with some activities or schoolwork or something, to not make it as hard or challenging or stressful, because it's much different than things used to be.
When I need to talk, I just need somebody to listen.
Someone to kind of connect to, I guess, to talk to better. Definitely a new friend or something like that, just to share opinions with and just have a good, positive conversation with.
Just being in school has really supported me over the past couple weeks, and just being able to have that connection with the teacher and not look at the screen as much as I was doing when school was all online.
Well, I think just knowing that the people who I care about, like my friends and stuff, having them knowing that they're there to support me and that they care about me has been helping a lot. So just keep your head held high. Things get harder before they get better. You just gotta keep your head held high, keep your hopes up, and don't let this ruin it. If you can keep your head held high, I promise things will get better. They have for me.
Have a positive attitude and keep moving forward. Like, real talk, man. Always remember, like, the storm always ends.
Thank you so much for sharing that video. And I think after that, being from the Edmond School District, we're going to chat with Joanna from the Edmond School District. So thanks for being here tonight, Joanna.
Thank you for having me.
We recently had a presentation from Wendy Birchhill of the Snohomish Health District at City Council. And one statement she made was, the focus on youth suicide prevention is important because if mental health or childhood trauma are addressed early, it may give young adults the tools needed to prevent adult suicide. And I think we've really heard that kind of as a recurring theme from multiple participants here on this panel tonight. So I'm curious, what is the school district doing to raise awareness about mental health and suicide within our student bodies?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I just like to thank everybody for their bravery, their advocacy, and their messages of hope, and especially to our fantastic student volunteers. I'm so proud of that video that they put together to give student voice in a wide variety of places. And so just so proud of them for speaking up and speaking their truth. Absolutely, I believe that the continued social emotional learning and focusing on that and practices to give students the problem solving skills to be able to address their issues before suicide is ever an option for them. That is true suicide prevention. And so I completely agree with Wendy's statement. We have school psychologists, school counselors. We now have newly hired school social workers, and we have family resource advocates in all of our schools who champion the mental health practices and social and emotional learning. In regards to, suicide prevention really is a multi-layered thing. It's not just one thing. And so we are always looking to seek to develop and enrich that. Part of our actual suicide prevention is we do have the Signs of Suicide program in our secondary schools, which is a phenomenal suicide prevention evidence-based practice that we have in all of our secondary schools. And then as you were speaking, Luke, about needing to actually, it was Tim, you were talking about bringing it into the elementary and the importance of that. And I love Gizmo, by the way. I think he's my next thing to maybe bring to elementary, because I just love that for the younger grades. We do our school psychologists who are in the elementary do what's called a stress happens curriculum, which is a modified curriculum from the Riding the Waves suicide prevention program for the elementary. And so we do deal with that in the upper grades. But like you said, moving that forward and continuing it even in the younger grades is always really super important. The other thing that we're doing is to try to normalize these conversations. We formed the very first suicide prevention committee in the district last year, and we did do our very first mental health community forum, which that video was a part of that. And so we just continue to grow and just normalize these conversations as much as possible.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I know you kind of mentioned this about, and I think Tim as well, bringing it into earlier schools than just say middle and high school. And I know Wendy had mentioned that as well. So I'm curious kind of how this approach is changing and maybe different than the past, and how are you educators and students maybe talking about mental health and suicide prevention differently now than has been in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Twofold. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, which is we've been in a crisis, a long-term crisis for an exorbitant amount of time. And so that is unheard of in most of our realms. And so, but then also the CDC just brought out some new data that said, although we did see the suicide rates for youth drop when schools closed, unfortunately, as soon as schools opened, they saw an exponential rise. And so they really saw that drop when we closed the schools, and now they're seeing a rise. And so it is so much more, it's so important now more than ever before to be addressing this. And so there is a sense of urgency because of those two things. The Edmond School District really approached the crisis from a kind of a crisis perspective. And we trained our entire staff on what's called the psychological first aid for schools model, which is we all were trained in regards to that crisis response model, which is we listen to students. We also listen to staff. We also listen to our community members. We share those experiences, and we hear those concerns for safety, and then we protect. So now we actually have to talk, what can you do? So if you're afraid to get COVID, what are steps that you could do to not catch COVID? Wear your mask, wash your hands. And so you give them a sense of power and control over what they can control. Then you connect. That connection was so important, just building that sense of community and being together and hearing those common reactions we were all having. And then model the importance of us modeling how to respond appropriately, just modeling the fact that, wow, I'm having a hard time really organizing my thoughts right now, and having that just be a normal thing. And then teach. So through that process, we also start to look at what's the skill set that we're hearing, especially from students that they don't have, that we need to teach and address, and especially where to go for help when they need it. And so we really did shift that into that more crisis response model and really focus on just plugging in.
Yeah, and you mentioned having counselors available, having social workers. So I'm curious, how can students on their own, or maybe parents, access those resources? And is it different if it's at an elementary or a middle or a high school, or is there kind of a centralized location people can go to?
Yeah, but both. I love being able to say that. I love being able to say it's both. We have some really great resources on our website. And there is, in particular, we have under the family resources, there's a mental health page. And the number one thing for students, for families, but also for our staff members, is we've contracted with a company by the name of Care Solace, which provides 24-hour, 7 days a week mental health referral system for us. So it really breaks down that barrier in regards to, I need help, how can I go find it? And literally within 15 minutes of making a referral, they're contacting you and walking you through that process. And it has just been an invaluable resource for us for the past year. So there's a link to be able to go, and anybody can self-refer through the Edmonds Care Solace page. We also have some really great tools on our webpage. One is a flyer for students. We initially made it for students, which is, it's okay to not be okay. What are some normal reactions to this very abnormal time we're having? Right? And then how do you know when your reaction is probably a little bit bigger than that? And then how to go get help. So those flyers are actually for Suicide Prevention Month, have been distributed for free in all of our buildings all over Edmond School District. And we just recently got it translated into Spanish as well. So that resource is there. And then as part of our mental health community forum, we also created a how to talk to my student about mental health, which is also in English, which is tips for parents, and also translated in Spanish. So all of those, as well as a mental health video series, is on our website that you can go to. But also on that website, there is a link directly to your we call them support staff at every building. And so who to contact at your building. If you have any questions, just pick up the phone and call the main number and explain to them, and they will know exactly who to connect you to.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Joanna. And just before I hand it back to Laura, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here tonight and participating in this panel and sharing such positive, uplifting messages of how we can improve mental health and suicide prevention in our various communities and our larger community. It's just really special. So I'm going to pass it back to Laura for some Q&A. I think we had some submitted ahead of time, and I think we might have some submitted live. So just a reminder, click on the Q&A tab and you can submit a question anonymously or with your name if you'd like. And so hand it back to you, Laura.
Thank you. And thank you all tonight. We do have some questions. The first one that came through, it's pretty easy. And it said, will you share the links and details on all referenced resources after the session? And the answer to that is yes. And I will work with all of our panelists to make sure that I can make that available. So thank you for that question. The next ones we'll let the panelists answer. Let's see. I will start. Okay. Is it okay to directly ask someone you know who appears to be struggling if they're thinking about suicide? And I think, 1, 2, 3, whoever would like to start, please.
I'll start. And then hope Joanna and Michelle will jump in afterwards. But absolutely, we want you to ask directly, are you thinking of dying by suicide? Are you thinking of taking your life? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? The reason being is it's not going to put the thought of suicide in their head. It's multiple layers. Joanna spoke about it. Michelle spoke a little bit about it. When somebody gets to a crisis point, they're in unbearable pain. And so when they hear the words and see that you are caring for them, that you're concerned for them, and that you see them, when they hear those words, it's almost like snapping them out of a little bit of pain and saying, wow, someone sees me, someone sees my pain, and someone acknowledges what I might be going through at that point. So absolutely, we strongly suggest reaching out. And even when you say the words, are you thinking of dying by suicide? And they say, no, but your gut is saying, I just don't trust that. We also encourage you to dig a little deeper. Sit with them and say, I know you've been through a lot. I know a lot is going on in your life and in the world. I know I've needed help recently. How are you handling all of that? We need to reach out to people, and that's how we're going to save lives.
Thank you, Justine.
I know, just for students too, a nice way to approach it is, wow, a lot of students who have gone through similar experiences such as yourself oftentimes might think about harming themselves or attempting suicide. Have you been thinking about that? And so you kind of just put it on the table really, really clearly for them. And I have never had a student ever get upset or anything. Instead, they get relieved.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that. And especially working with older adults, I do the PHQ-9, which is the depression scale, all the time with them. And the last question is, do you have thoughts of suicide? And I hear a lot, well, I wouldn't care if I, didn't wake up tomorrow morning. And so then you really have to start kind of asking a little bit more, deep questions. And absolutely, it's good to be very pointed, because you need to kind of know where they're at. And as Justine said, that it helps them feel heard. It helps them feel like you care about them. So absolutely.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to answer that one? Okay, thank you. The next one. What is active listening, and how can it help somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis?
I don't want to be the only one answering, but I'll go ahead and lead off. And, active listening is actually one of the hardest things as an adult, as somebody, especially if you're in a mentorship type of role. So we often think of parents, teachers, those in the community, coaches for youth, and then as adults, employers, friends, and people that we look up to or admire. And so when we look at how to listen, it really is about being actively focused on what they're saying, letting them and allowing them a safe space to say whatever it is that they need to say, and being there, letting them know that you care and letting them speak. It's not our time as active listeners to give any advice, to say, it's okay, life is worth living, you're going to get past this. Not when somebody is in a mental health crisis or struggling. Right now, they're in so much pain, they can't see that. So being active listeners means just opening up your heart to that individual and allowing them to say whatever it is that they need to say. I think Sarah made mention of that earlier, allowing people to really be present on who they are. And whatever that conversation leads to, it's not about us speaking. It's really about engaging, open and questions, and getting them to speak their truth.
Thank you, Justine.
If I could add two very quick things. Looking at this while you're talking to somebody is not active listening. So put this away and don't judge.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This one just came through. Are there suggestions you have for young adults or teens going back to school after so much time on Zoom?
I'll jump in just super quick, because this is what we're dealing with. And it kind of is, it's been overwhelming. I think it feels like we've gone from 0 to 100. So we're seeing it, we're feeling it, we're hearing it from our students that it has been overwhelming. So I think the first thing is to normalize, is to just say, wow, I've heard a lot of kids being really overwhelmed right now going back. This is a big adjustment to have to go from nobody to, my son has 300 students in his class. I mean, in his freshman class. So it's like normalizing and talking about it, about, just again, being really real. The other thing is to simplify, just to really keep things as simple as possible, prioritize self-care. And when I say simplify, that's sleeping, eating, moving as much as possible. And then prioritizing, just if there's 5 assignments, pick the one that's worth the most points and do that one first. And, you're just going to have to maybe scaffold a little bit and provide a little bit of structure for them when they might not have needed it before. But just think of their reserves as being really whittled down now. And then we threw them into school. So we might need to come in and support them a little bit.
Thank you. All right, I'll move on to the next one. Let's see. Okay. What should someone do not specifically, but not exclusively, our youth do if someone asks them to keep their suicidal thoughts secret?
Well, I can tell you that the Signs of Suicide program, as especially part of their video series, addresses this specifically. And it talks about how we have to, it's acknowledge, care, and tell. So you acknowledge somebody has a problem, you then care enough about that person to go tell a trusted adult. And so we really try to empower students that it's not your job to fix the problem, but it is your job to care enough about that person to go tell an adult to be able to handle that issue. And that sometimes your friends might get upset with you at first, but in the long run, they always end up and they're happy they got the help. And so we really send that very positive message that an upset friend is better than an upset safe friend is better than a happy unsafe one. And just really, we use that same language then when we're talking to the friend. I can't believe they're told on me and and I'm like, wow, you are so lucky you have a friend that cares so much about you that they're concerned about you. And that's why I'm here. And so we kind of just use that language on both ends.
Thank you. Michelle, would the same apply for for adults as well?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I think I think that there's that feeling that you're dishonoring somebody's trust that they've given to you. But again, it's because you care about them and you want them to be safe. So definitely.
Thank you.
And I just want to jump in and add a plug because I think kind of what Michelle and Joanna, what you're talking about right now is at the heart of the question, persuade, refer training as well that Wendy will be giving next week. I think it's the 30th, but that goes more in depth to exactly what you're saying and really why that needs to happen, kind of being that active bystander and stepping in. So thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone in the panel be willing to share personal tips about how they are working to protect their own mental health and how this may have changed during the current pandemic times?
I think for me, and I apologize, my computer's about to lose power, so if I disappear, that's why. But I think for me, it's I'm a very positive person, and I don't necessarily let myself feel down for too long. But I think I was suppressing how much this pandemic was really affecting me. And it got to a point that I was angry all the time. I was short-tempered with my family. And then I realized it's because I wasn't really allowing myself to feel how much this pandemic has affected me. And when I acknowledged that and acknowledged that, yes, this has been really hard and it's okay that it's been really hard, that I've been able to start to feel better. and to take care of myself in ways that I wasn't before.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. The next one. If you're living with somebody who is depressed or suicidal, what steps should you take within your home to help protect them?
Justine and I are looking at each other because we both are on the Snohomish County Suicide Prevention Task Force. And I can almost guarantee you in our head popped up means restriction. And so that's a really fancy way of saying whenever somebody has a plan and then they have a way, they have a specific plan with a particular way to do it. And then if they have access to those means to carry it out, if you can restrict those means. And so oftentimes in households, especially in the pandemic, there's been kind of a stockpiling of medication. And so, locking up your medication, taking your firearms, locking them up, removing them from the home, even if it is temporarily, like just getting all of those items that could be potential means out of the home and or restricted is the number one way to deal with that. Justine, what else would you add?
No, that was great. The thing that I would add is typically when somebody is in crisis and they're at the point where they're unbearable pain, they need to escape it, they can't process thinking of a different way. So if you know their plan, you can create distance between their plan and the lethal need. And so that creates a sense of they can't get to that. So then hopefully as their crisis continues, heightens, and then comes down, because we do know that average crisis that somebody is in for their mental health is about 27 minutes. So when somebody can process and start getting to thinking and getting past that pain point, that is when we can start seeing the thought processes coming back. And so if it's really about, if you know what they're thinking or what their plan is, because that's the only way that's going to relieve their plan, and really be thinking that the brain isn't functioning normally at that point. Just like when you're in the most painful situation of your life, childbirth, in a car accident, breaking a leg or arm, that point and that pain, that is debilitating. That is something that we can't process everything around us. The same thing happens when we're in a mental health crisis. So be thinking of a way that you can create that barrier, as Joanna said, but also think of how you can save store to create that distance and to create a safe environment for that individual.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we still have a little bit of time left. So I was thinking if each panelist wanted to take a minute or so and give, some closing thoughts, or if there was something that felt, they wanted to expand on just a bit, this might be a good time for that. And I was going to say, start with Michelle, because I heard about, your battery. So giving you that chance first.
Thank you. I have like 14% left. So, I just think that everything that was spoken about was so important. And I think the one takeaway is that it's important to normalize mental health just as much as physical health. And it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to ask somebody about if they're thinking about harming themselves or committing suicide. Because that is the way that it kind of hands them that bridge to kind of latch onto somebody and be able to get the help. So I think that's my one takeaway that I like people to know is that we need to normalize this. And I think everybody said that on this panel tonight, and make it just as common as, any other type of illness that people have. It's no different than a physical illness.
Thank you. Joanna?
Sorry, Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And my kind of thought process to that is the risk factors versus the warning signs. Risk factors are indicators, kind of things that load up. So such as, like when it comes to health, like high stress, lack of exercise, poor eating habits, those are risk factors, right? But then the warning signs are, okay, now I'm going to have a heart attack. So a warning sign would be pain in your chest, feeling dizzy, dropping to the floor. And so you don't wait when you see a warning sign, right? You could pick up the phone and call 911. And that's the same thing when you see somebody kind of in a mental health crisis. When you see those warning signs, you need to act. And that's where the QPR, nice little segue there, comes in, because that's where you can insert yourself into that situation. The other thing about normalizing this conversation is, when I think about our students, is they know way more than you think they do. And even if your kid is doing okay, have the conversation with them. Are any of your friends talking about this? Have you heard anything? You can talk to me about that, right? Like, because they hear things, they know things. That's why we got to empower them to speak up and to help each other, and to, again, come tell a trusted adult so that we can do our jobs. So, so that was my big aha, Michelle, when you were sharing, was we got to talk to all our kids, even if they seem okay.
Thank you. Sarah?
I feel like we have a really strong community that really wants to hold everyone up. Lean into that. The folks on this panel and all the folks that they touch as well. Yeah, there's help out there, and people want to help. So reach out.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I think I really don't have much to add. I mean, what a wonderful group, and I'll put a plug in for Wendy for next week. I've done some panels with her, and she is wonderful. So I encourage people to hear her. I guess all I'll say is, and I mentioned this earlier, but take the time. We get busy. We get busy at work. We get busy with activities. Kids are busy with school. They're busy with homework. Or tired, or when you get home. But take the time. Take the time to check in with your kid. Ask them how they're doing. If they say fine, ask a little bit more. I mean, fine's probably not one of the most passive aggressive words in the English language, but ask them again. How are they really feeling? How do they feel about this? So take a little bit of time and have those deeper discussions with your kids, and just give them a hug. Give them a hug and be there for them, and again, listen without judgment.
Thank you, Tim. Justine?
Thank you. My takeaway and final thoughts are, resiliency is key. Resiliency in the community, in our resources, and how we approach our mental health. We're all going to change our needs in and out of our lives as we ebb and flow, as the pandemic ebbs and flows, as the environment around us ebbs and flows. And so knowing and studying what works for your mental health, make it a priority to focus on your mental health. And especially if you have a youth or someone in your life that is struggling, show them that you're taking care of your mental health, you're utilizing self-care, and you're being proactive and really adjusting to what you need during this time and moving forward too. Sometimes we have trauma that hits us out of nowhere and we need to adjust, and it's okay to adjust. It's normal to adjust. I also want people to know they're not alone. There's all of us as panelists here. There's a multitude of individuals throughout the community that are in the silent suffering, of all ages, of all ethnicities, religion. We all have mental health, but it feels very much alone. And so it's a very brave thing, a very strong thing to reach out, talk to somebody, acknowledge that, you know what, I'm having a hard time right now, and be okay with that and seek the care that you need. And that doesn't always mean a therapist or a counselor or, the big key ingredients to getting mental health that we typically identify with. It could be making sure we're paying our bills on time. It could be doing our to-do list. How can you check off to-do list to start lessening the load, to start unpacking what is weighing you down? And I also want to just kudos, thank you so much, the City of Edmonds. And Joanna is a huge resource. I want to acknowledge that the Edmonds School District does have an incredible force when it comes to mental health and particularly suicide prevention. It is not normal in what is provided. And so if you are surrounded by youth or have a connection to a youth, utilize that power, set them up, continuing on education or into the real world. They need that. So if you're seeing them in middle school, high school, you have those resources, utilize them, reach out. And if you're suffering, make sure you know what to do. And leaders, as leaders, communicate that. So thank you for this evening. Thank you to all the panelists. I think it's amazing to bring together such talent within a community. And I applaud you all. And even those viewing this, seeing this, I applaud you because suicide and the conversation around mental health is a scary topic. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all for being here tonight, sharing your stories, your expertise, and your advocacy. It's, I've grown through this. I really appreciate it. And I want to hand it back to Luke and let Luke wrap up for tonight and do closing comments and a little bit of information. So thank you.
Well, yeah, and thank you all again for sharing those closing messages. And I think, Justine, what you said at the end about the resources being out there, I'm here now to plug those resources again. We do have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-273-TALK, which is 800-273-8255. We also have a Snohomish County 24-hour crisis line that is specific to Snohomish County, and that's 800-584-3578. And especially for youth, we have a Teen Link line, which is 866-6546. And that's where teens can talk to trained peer volunteers. Maybe it's more comfortable to talk to someone of a similar age, and that's from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the evenings. We have these resources and a whole lot more at wecare.edmondswa.gov. It's the same website we used last year. We're using it again this year. It's always there available with a really comprehensive list of free resources that are available to everyone. We'll have a link to tonight's panel discussion as this is being recorded, as well as an information and link for next week's Question, Persuade, Refer suicide prevention training with Wendy Birchill from the Snohomish Health District. Again, wecare.edmondswa.gov. Thank you all so much again. I'm in sponge mode, trying to soak up all this knowledge and experience and wisdom that you all have, and thinking about how we can turn that back into positive movement on mental health, mental illness, and suicide prevention in our community. So thank you again for all the work that you're doing, and thank you for our viewers for being here tonight or watching the recording in the future. Please continue to do good work in your community. Thank you.
Thank you.